Shalom and welcome to the second episode of Torah in Color. I'm April Baskin. It's so good to be here with you right now, and I'm excited to dive in to what I think is going to be a very juicy and maybe even challenging second episode. Today we will be unpacking Parshat Noach, or the Torah portion about Noah and his journey, as well as a host of other topics, some of which we'll cover today and some of which perhaps we'll cover in the future, or maybe you'll want to talk about in the comments section. We'll see. So I think it's worthwhile to take a moment to buckle your seatbelt, because I think I'm going to be taking you on a bit of an intellectual and emotional journey today as we explore this very intense and epic Torah portion. Okay, so just a quick note before we dive in. This week I'm going to be weaving in another component into the show that I've been very excited for a while now about doing, which is the Torah in Color music playlist. Aren't you so excited? Okay, if you aren't yet, this is like really awesome. So basically it's my way of bringing some of what happens in my world and in circles with some of my Jewish friends of color and some of my white Jewish friends as well who are into hip hop and all different kinds of music, where we free associate and make connections between different things we're going through in our lives and how it connects to different elements of our lives, including the music we listen to. So for instance, I'm still, by the way, thinking about exactly how I'm going to weave this into the show. So if you have ideas about that, about cool ways or smart ways or efficient ways, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear it. But like for this week, one of the songs that I've selected for this week's Torah portion is KRS-One's Step Into a World. Amazing! Because it totally aligns with this idea of the flood coming and it being a new world and entering a new world, except with amazing hip hop. So that should be really fun. Oh, and by the way, if you're on Instagram, you should definitely follow me I'm at joyous.justice, because I'm planning on really having fun with some of the music components, if this is of interest to you, doing different Instagram stories related to the Torah portion and the songs where I can actually play them and I don't need to worry about copyright infringement like I do on YouTube. So here I'm just going to reference it and share some links or a link to my music playlist on either my website or the YouTube channel as well. I may incorporate at times different lyrics from the songs into my analysis. I may mention the song or not. And if you catch it and if you know the songs, feel free to shout them out and I'll get you bonus points or give you a shout out on the following video for that. I have sort of a sweet and sour or salty and sweet episode for you today. I want to have a little bit of a hard or critical conversation about one of the elements of the text that I'm not comfortable with, and I want to be real and honest about that and share that with you. Also noting that my perspective evolves over time, and I'm always open to hearing other perspectives, and I'm also a strong believer in both and. So I can analyze a passage one way and also hold that it can also be interpreted in a completely separate way too, and that both of those things can be valid. Okay, are you ready? Your seatbelt on? Okay, so here's the headline. God's behavior as depicted in this Torah portion seems like that of an abusive partner to me. As someone who has studied the dynamics of abusive relationships in college, and also, like many people, have had my own encounters with abusive and unhealthy relationships, whether they be romantic or professional or in the context of friendship or mentorship. So in reading the Torah this week, I noticed 6 signs that indicated to me that the dynamic between God and Noah was like that, an abused person and their abuser. Reason number 1, I'll start from sort of the climax or pinnacle of it and work my way backwards. The rainbow. This is one of the first covenants that God makes with humanity, is this beautiful peace offering of an enormous beautiful rainbow in the sky. And I've always heard this, I've always heard other people talk about this as a really poetic demonstration. For me, as I was reading the Torah and also holding in mind my personal lived Torah and seeing how those resonated, I was experiencing a lot of discomfort. The rainbow, to me, after reading a number of concerning dynamics, to then have it conclude with God making a rainbow seemed like the classic flowers or gifts that an abusive husband gives his wife after he's beaten her or humiliated her or done some form of significant abuse and harm. Oh, that wasn't me, I won't do it again. But that's not how abuse works. Once that click happened for me about, whoa, actually I'm not feeling this rainbow, then everything else fell into place. That there are multiple signs that this is an abusive, unhealthy dynamic. Point 2, God has this victim narrative that's in the extreme and is all about how woe is me, is poor God, and all of my humans are misbehaving and it's just all horrible and it's all their fault and they're just so bad. And there's no ownership of the fact that it's like, dude, you're God. You have infinite control of the situation. You have infinite options of any number of interventions you can do to course correct here. And instead of doing that, it's just like, it's all over, it's the end, everybody's horrible, and they need to go. And externalizing the problem. Like the problem is them. That's point 2. The third is oppressive favoritism or tokenism. This idea of lifting up Noah as though he's superhuman, as opposed to just being a good, like there were probably other good people, but God using this extreme language that no, again, sort of both further beginning the process of isolation for that person and further affirming his victimhood of everyone's bad except you. You're the one who's going to save the day, when it's like, you're the one in control of your life and literally the entire universe. But I repeat myself. You can see it really, these patterns are, so it's just not, the equation isn't working out for me of one where I feel a lot of compassion here. It's God, yo. I mean, in the story. And side note, by the way, there are different parts of the Torah that align with my perception of the world, of how things have developed, of God, and there are other parts that I don't believe necessarily happened. I mean, not even like, but I do think that they are a part of a sacred text, that it is a holy and sacred and enriching act to be in dialogue with them, even if it means like I'm doing. So speaking of not working, some of these kind of bleed into each other. So another element that I see is just a general lack of rational perspective from God in this part of the story. There's just a lot of excessive emotion. There's no point of calming down. He is just on this warpath of destruction, and that everything needs to go, and that there are no good people, which I started to allude to. And that just doesn't even make sense. Like, I'll just give you one example. What about Noah's mama? Did Noah just miraculously become righteous out of nowhere? What about Noah's friends? If there were teachers or mentors in Noah's life? What about Noah's spouse's family? I'm also annoyed about the fact that Noah's wife and daughters-in-law have no storyline and aren't even given names. I'm about to correct that in this episode too, so stay tuned. Okay, so I think I made my point. So it's just not sounding rational to me. And 40 days, like, it's also just excessive. Like, after being submerged for a day, pretty sure nearly everything is dead. Certainly all of the humans are. Once the water rose, or maybe it took, I don't remember exactly. I read it in the portion, but however long it took to cover the mountains past a certain point that it specifies in the Torah, all of that, like, and it almost seems like an unhealthy litmus test, like a further testing of Noah's faith. For what? To me, Noah is not the one needing an evaluation and a check-in about mental and emotional stability in this scenario. I'm just saying. So then, and related to the flood is number 5 would be, this is an incredibly extreme example of how people who have abusive tendencies isolate their victims and remove and try to sever their ties with their sources of love and support. And outside of Noah's family, so I guess that's one piece, God completely maintains Noah and his family on this pedestal and just destroys everyone else. All of his connections, family, and finally, in a more sort of poetic, more metaphorical way. First I was annoyed. I mean, I'd heard this before, but I was like, "Oy vey." Just because I have a love of the Jewish people and the tradition, and Torah study doesn't necessarily mean that I accept everything wholesale, far from it, or that I don't have emotional reactions. And I was irritated when I saw the age of Noah, because I'd forgotten that. I'd learned that before, but I'd forgotten that the Torah says that Noah was 600 years old, and Noah died at the age of 900. And as I was letting this Torah portion percolate in my mind, it occurred to me, well, actually, in light of the abusive dynamic, the 600 and 900 year thing actually makes sense. I'm hoping to get into this more in future episodes, or hoping might be a strong word. I aspire to get into this more in future episodes if I can figure out the right way to do it that feels right and aligned for me. But I am planning to go at a later time more into the oppression that my family and I have had to navigate in our lives. But suffice to say for now, as someone who has survived a lot of trauma in my life, nearly all of my loved ones also navigate, or many of my loved ones navigate a lot of trauma and tragedy. In a certain respect, I think it ages you. I've said, and I've had other people in my life who are either spiritual or healing professionals, also note in one way or another, like I've lived multiple lifetimes in my life, where my life has looked very different at different points, and it's almost like I've had couple simultaneous tracks running, and one stopped, a different life stopped, and another started, but in some way I still have in my mind where my life could have gone. And also just the stress when you're in a highly oppressive or triggering and terrifying moment. It's like more time passes, it's like both moving slowly, and so much is happening because you're having to use all of your senses and go into that fight or flight at times, also especially if you're a member of a marginalized group, while walking through the world as if everything's okay, and also interacting perhaps at times with someone who's abusing you like it's okay, for safety, for survival. And it feels in a lot of ways like it puts more years on your life. I remember when I was in my late 20s, I felt like I was almost 40. And luckily I'm 35 now, and I feel like I've done enough healing work. My timelines are syncing up, and I feel like I'm right where I'm supposed to be. So Noah living 600 years, to me, one interpretation of that could be is that in a number of ways his life was rough. A thought from there that can be a segue to the next segment, also potentially agitational for some, but more fun and energizing, I think, is I also thought back to this point about me being not satisfied. In light of how invisible they are in the story, if that's how old Noah was, what about his wife and his daughters-in-law? How long were their lives in light of what they had to deal with, while the patriarch in their family, who had visibility, was in a pretty dysfunctional dynamic with God? So with that, I want to switch gears and get a little more comfy in my chair. And that brings us to the point of Noah's wife. The story, this passage didn't make sense to me, where there's this very dysfunctional dynamic. God makes this promise, and then the story moves on, which is such a male oppressor, not all men, but a male oppressor version of a story where there's this gift given and then everything is fine, when we know in reality and statistics demonstrate that when someone is an abuser, almost always they repeat and it escalates. And so to me there had to be some kind of intervention, because what happens next is that everything is fine. And I don't buy that just a rainbow made everything all better, and God just saying, after all of this destruction and likely killing tons of innocent people. So my modern Midrash for Noah's wife is, so one, we know from a wonderful women's Torah commentary, you should check it out by the way, very cool, It comforts me to know that the rabbis were also preoccupied with, but who was this woman and what was her name? And they suspect that it was Naamah. Well, they're all descendants of Adam, but they believe Noah's wife was a woman named Naamah. I had this epiphany. So the story wasn't making sense to me, that it goes from this rainbow, which is to me a half-hearted gift offering in light of what happened, and then the story moves on really beautifully, and it didn't make sense to me until I was listening to my music, which I'm often doing, and this song by Quincy Jones, or produced by Quincy Jones, that has a number of phenomenal artists in it, came on while I was on the plane, and the song starts out with this woman singing, "It was raining when I met you. You were soaking wet, no time to be impressed. But I remember so much later on, you were someone I would not forget." And I was like, that would be such a cool story, that that's how Noah's wife met him, is that he's always been near water. He's always wet. He's kind of like a wet puppy. I was like, what is your deal? Why are you always doing this stuff, right? But like, it was as though it were his destiny. And this song, it is sung by these women who embody really deep, healing, nourishing strength, love, conviction, and vision around love and around a future that brings us all along and cares for vulnerable children. And even though what they see does not align with the future they want, encouraging those around them to have a higher vision while also dealing with their needs in the moment and pain, and taking care of themselves, sort of the best version you can get of someone who is well adjusted and has taken care of themselves and is taking care of themselves and has this overflowing cup of love and wisdom to give to others. It's almost superhuman, except it's not, because I know people like this in my life, and perhaps you do too. And so that's my modern Midrash sort of backstory creation, is that in fact, arguably, the protagonist is Naamah. And that's how it all works. That's how they were able to pull all of this off, because it's not, no man is an island, no woman is an island. And Noah is lauded as this champion, when in fact it was actually his wife who saw this dysfunctional dynamic, but also saw the value of Noah's vision and was able to adjust. Maybe even saw the fact that many innocent people died, but said, as I've often found my family needing to say and needing to say in my own life, this trauma shouldn't have happened. It is unjust. I need to heal from it. And this is where things are now. And so now I need to build the best pathway forward and get myself to go through healing to the point where I can get myself to a place where I can be proactive about envisioning a better future from here and never forgetting the past. And I love this song because there's this sense that this woman also has sixth sensory abilities and connects with feminine versions of God and with her ancestors and with spirit energy. And she is just this fully embodied, empowered priestess mama who is powerful and strong. So that's the story for me. Like, if I could possibly rewrite the Torah, which is quite chutzpahdik, I know, audacious, but it just is a theoretical exercise. And I would want to name this portion Naamah, because I don't see enough from Noah's behavior that explains how everything ended up working out so well, unless there was this woman there who saw this situation happening and was like, this is my husband, and I see that there is a future coming out of this, but we need to get rid of this extra stuff. So I'm going to focus on taking care of these other things so he can have his space to work on that stuff, and I can offer some insight and water some seeds of wisdom, and we're going to keep this moving forward. We're going to get to the other side. I just want to say have a moment of appreciation and gratitude for a number of men and women in my family who have embodied this extremely elevated and sacred and holy demeanor and disposition that has been such a guiding light in my own life, and that I offer to you as a gift of inspiration, if it is such to you, or perhaps a mirror for you or someone in your life who, when you hear this description, you're like, oh, I want to also, speaking of women to lift up, give a special shout out to Rabbi Mary Zamor, who is the executive director of the Women's Rabbinic Network. In my preparation for this Torah talk today, a couple weeks ago, I was trying to find different Devar Torah or Divrei Torah, and I couldn't find any until I found Rabbi Zamor's about the Tower of Babel, and most people see it as a punishment for people, and I loved that she talked about the importance of diversity and how our world is so much better when we speak a lot of different languages. And I hadn't noticed who'd written it, and I was so inspired to see that likely a mainstream leader was thinking this thoughtfully about diversity, equity, and inclusion in relationship to the text. When I saw that it was Rabbi Zamor, I was like, yep, of course. I just laughed and smiled, like a knowing smile, because I had the pleasure of working with her while I was serving as an executive leader in the Reform movement, and I was just continually impressed with her insight and her leadership. So a shout out to Rabbi Zamor, the many phenomenal women who are leading in really bold and powerful ways in Jewish life, who are far too many to list, and I see your faces in my mind right now, and I look forward to being able to lift up other leaders in our community moving forward at different points. I think that's it for this week. That is my Torah in color. What is your Torah in color? I would really love to know. Please let me know in the comments below. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And I look forward to continuing to be in touch. If you have a chance, if you enjoyed this talk and found it interesting and want to continue the vibe, check out the playlist. Listen to the songs. They're so great. And we'll be in touch soon. Have a great week and take good care. Much love. Bye.